Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be working some nice, just gentle, light hip mobility, spinal mobility, and I want to get into some core activation, just low level core activation, getting into anterior core, posterior core, getting some glute activation as well. So let's get started. We're going to start on our back, getting into our crocodile breath, get the breath activated, making our big C shapes with our hands, thumbs going in that low back area, index fingers wrapping around the front, hands below the ribs, above the hip bone in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall, and allowing those hands to kind of cinch down just a little bit so that we can create some resistance for the inhale phase of our breath. As we inhale, I want to feel that pressure of our abdominal wall pushing out and away, pushing into that low back, pushing out through the sides and into the belly, all at the same time, like you're blowing up a balloon. And I want to blow that balloon up nice and slowly on the inhale. It can be a nice 5 up to 10 second count. Inhale, it could be a 5 up to 10 second count on the exhale. As we exhale, breathing out through the mouth, drawing that navel up and in towards the spine, cinching those hands down to create resistance for that next inhale phase. And with each exhale on your inhale, see if you can slowly get that balloon to expand a little bit bigger on each breath so that your last breath is the maximum amount of capacity to blow that balloon up. Good. We're going to slowly move, getting into our shin box position. I'm starting in left side shin box. Left knee is forward, left hand is coming down, grounding to the floor. We're going to let that elbow spiral out and away so that we get that chest opening up, shoulder blade is packing down, nice tall spine. Also have weight shifted over to that left hip so that the right hip is free and off the floor. I don't want to try to sit that back hip down. I want it off the floor. Starting with our nice hip openers, continuing to inhale into our crocodile breath, exhale, drawing navel up and in as we lift that back knee slowly to the ceiling. Inhale into that crocodile breath as we set the knee back down. Moving nice and slow at the pace of our breath. With each one, seeing if you can get a little higher. Can you squeeze a little bit more range without forcing it? And just noticing, how does this feel in the hip? How much range of motion do you have that hip actually traveling? How high does that knee travel? Once we get to 5, nice slow transition to the opposite side. Again, grounding palm, spiraling that elbow pit out and away. Nice packed shoulder, tall spine. Inhale, filling up that crocodile breath. Exhale, drawing navel up and in as we slowly lift that hip. Notice, does this hip feel tighter or more mobile than the other side? My left hip, chronically tight, a little bit tighter, not quite the same degree of range of motion in it. Although for the most part, this feels a little bit more mobile than some days do. But there's always a little bit of a difference in this left hip compared to the right hip. Once we get to 5, nice slow transition back to the other side. Again, letting that back hip off the floor, packed shoulder, grounded palm, spiraled elbow, tall spine. Now, feeling that breath, inhale breath as a weight, like you're filling up a bowling ball, moving into that back hip bowl so that that back hip reaches to the floor without shifting. I don't want to shift weight into it. My weight is still on my left. Inhale, drops into that hip. Exhale, that hip lifts up and then moves forward, and we're actively scooping that tailbone into it. Inhale, lets that tailbone pull back as we fill up that bowl, reaching that hip to the floor. Exhale, comes up, moves forward, and scoop. If you imagine your sacrum is the palm of your hand, your fingers are your tailbone. So as I get to this front point, I'm trying to scoop and reach those fingers forward of the body. The more I scoop, or the more you scoop, the more you should feel some stretch through the front of the hip. And if we're able to get full hip extension, you'll start to feel some contraction in that glute. I want to get as much of that active stretch without going into pain and as much of that contraction in the glute. If you're able to get here, keep scooping, get active, feel as much of that contraction in the back. Once we get about 5, even up to 10 reps on that, slow transition to the other side. Same thing, grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, tall spine, weight is shifted. Inhale into that back hip bowl. Exhale, let it lift up, move forward, and actively scooping into it. And with each one, see if you can get just a little bit more of that active scoop. Again, one hip is more than likely a little bit tighter than the other. So I want to notice that, because that tension in the front of the hip is going to restrict your ability to scoop and activate that glute. So I want to find as much balance between the sides as possible. I want to get as much glute activation on the left side as I'm getting on the right side. So if there's some limitations to it, I want to go a little slower, spend a little bit more time getting into that active glute. How much scoop can I get my hip to travel without forcing it? Again, at 5 up to 10 reps, and we're going to slowly transition back to the other side. We're going to do that same breath into that bowl. Exhale, active scoop. And I want to really get maximally in that scoop, maximum glute contraction. And then we're adding in our reach with rotation. So I'm reaching through my knees, seeing how far can I get my fingers to extend. Inhale, bring it all the way back into that back hip bowl. Exhale, lifts, actively scoops. Again, I want to get maximum contraction in that glute, and I want to hold that maximum contraction as I spiral and reach. And I'm seeing how far can I get those fingertips to extend without losing that scoop. And with each one, I'm seeing if I can get those fingers to go a little bit further. Nice slow exhale as we reach. Once we get 5 up to 10 reps, slow transition to the other side. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, tall spine. Nice inhale into that back hip bowl. Exhale, lifts, scoop. Again, lock in that scoop, get that maximum contraction, and then nice rotation. Notice if this side feels tighter in your rotation. If you already know, if there's already some hip tightness, greater hip tightness on this side, probably means you're going to have more tightness in your rotation as well. And with each one, we're seeing if we can get a little bit further. Can we get this side to feel more similar to the other side? Find that locked in hip, maximum glute contraction. Hold that glute contraction as you rotate. Once you match that side, we're going to come back to the other side. And now we're going to get into our folds. Folds today, I want to work through the shin. So I want to keep shoulders square with the shin, hands square with the shoulders. Continuing to inhale into that back hip bowl. Exhale, scoop, lock in that maximum scoop with as much glute contraction as you can manage. And then hold that scoop as we get a nice slow fold, reaching through the shins. Inhale brings it all the way back up. Let that breath fill up that bowl, reaching it to the floor. Exhale, lift, scoop actively. Find that glute. Keep that glute scooped as you fold forward. By keeping that back hip active, we should be able to get a little bit of a mobility stretch in this back hip at the same time that we get a mobility stretch in the glute of the front hip. Notice, how does it feel? How easy is it to stay square? Do you feel like your body wants to move off that shin because it feels tight and restricted? And then we're going to slowly transition to the other side. And we're going to do the exact same thing. So again, nice square to the shin. Inhale into that back hip bowl. Exhale, actively scoop. Feel that contraction in the glute as we then nice slow fold. Inhale all the way back into that back hip pocket. Notice if this side feels tighter and more restricted in areas than the other side did. This side is harder for me to stay square. My body really wants to move over in this direction, so I have to really work to find square and to maintain it, which creates more tension in my back hip as well as the right side of my low back, and a little bit in the right glute. Once we match 5 or 10 reps on that side, now we get to start moving side to side. Now, as we're going side to side, I'm less concerned about staying square with the shin angle. We can just get into a nice, comfortable fold. Inhale as we come back up. Nice, slow windshield wiper to the other side. Nice exhale as we fold. And we're going to go back and forth a good 10 up to 20 times. Another nice little cue on this is if we come back to thinking about your sacrum as your palm of your hand and your tailbone as your fingers, as you're sliding your hands forward, slide your tailbone and kind of reach the fingers back oppositionally, like you're moving to the back wall while your hands are moving to the wall in front. That sliding back should get a little bit more stretch in a mobility stretch into that front glute. Want to make sure that we are moving slow. We're going with the speed of our breath. I don't want to get sped up on these movements. Now that we've gotten a few reps in, I want to start to open up our shin angle by letting that back leg slide open as we get into that nice fold. And I'm continuing to let that tailbone reach oppositionally from fingers. And then getting into the same position on the opposite side. Whatever position I was on one side, I want to match it so I can feel, how does one side feel compared to the other? What am I noticing in that back hip? What am I noticing in the front hip? Those differences that we feel side to side are very relevant, especially if you're dealing with any types of chronic pain, tightness, tension, discomfort. How you feel when you get into these little mobility flows will give you a lot of important and helpful information as far as where those tension patterns are coming from, which then allows us to do a little bit more active work that can have a pretty big impact on reducing pain and discomfort. As we get into our last 3 to 5 reps, we're continuing to open up that back leg as much as you comfortably can. We're moving towards a full like yoga class pigeon pose, but not everybody has the mobility for a full yoga class pigeon pose. So don't force it. However far back you're able to get that back hip and still be able to get some level of decent fold without pain. That's what we want to move into that range, non-painfully, non-stressfully, non-forcefully. Like I said that twice. Good. So now we're going to come back to our starting point in shin box. We're going to do a little bit of shin box to knees. Shin box up to knees is a good way to get some. We're going to get some aiming to get some good glute activation, stretch and activation. Also good for pelvic floor. However, I want to be cautious of the knees. If you have knee pain, I want to go very slow and make sure that this is not feeling grindy or painful at the level of the knees. To start with, we can use our hands just to guide us through the movement. One hand is going behind that front knee, the other hand in front, and we can do a little push and pull. And as we're coming up, I want to actively scoop my tailbone forward to help me lift. Once I get up, again, I'm making sure it's not painful on my knees. Once I get up to the top, I'm actively scooping that tailbone forward. Feel that nice stretch through the front of the hips. And then as we come back down, we're untucking, reaching that tailbone back as we bring hands to help guide us to the floor. And then we can move to the other side. Again, I'm just starting out, making sure that this is not painful on the knees. Nice, actively scooping from the tailbone as we're lifting up. Continue to actively scoop at the top to feel that mobility stretch in the hips. And then using the hands to ease back down to the floor. Now, if that was not painful on the knees, but you experience knee pain, it's okay to continue to move through the shin box using your hands. I want you to use that subtle cheat in order to help build this movement. We're still getting good work into the hips, pelvic floor region, and glutes, even if you're using your hands. If you don't have knee pain and you're able to do this without your hands and it does not hurt, then we're going to actively try to move from that tailbone, scooping it up. It's like your tailbone is what is lifting you up. So as you scoop, let that scoop pull your hips up. As you get pulled up, you're continuing to actively scoop to feel that stretch through the front. And then on the way down, we're untucking, reaching that tailbone back. And this is where I want to imagine fingers reaching back to that back wall. I'm seeing how far back can I reach my hip before it touches the ground. Hands can counter reach in order to get you a little bit more length. Then once you kiss the ground, active scoop to pull the hips back up. Untuck, reach, counter reach through the fingers. The more you're able to reach and counter reach, you should feel some stretch into that glute. As you're coming to the floor, scoop brings you all the way back up. We get good 5, nice slow stretch, and then nice pull up to the top of that shin box. Then we'll switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, that lift is coming from that tailbone. Scoop, feel that scoop, pull the hips up, continue to actively scoop into it to feel that mobility stretch through the front of the hips. Then untuck, reaching that tailbone back, sliding backwards, counter reach through the fingers. I'm trying not to touch the floor, but I'm seeing how far can I get my hips to travel. Once I kiss the floor, actively scoop to bring it right back up. You might notice that one side feels tighter, more restricted, easier, or more challenged. If there's a difference in one side compared to the other, then this movement is a big deal. This is something I want to work on because we are directly working into the pelvic floor region. If you have an imbalance through one side compared to the other, that's going to be relevant to our pelvic floor. I have a little bit more tightness in this right adductor area than I did on the left side, which is interesting. Good. All right. So now we're going to shift into an inverted position. Feet are in front, knees bent, hands are coming down next to the hips or a little bit behind. Grounding palms, spiraling the elbow pits out and away. Feel the shoulder blades drop down and back. Feel the chest open up and lift. Then we're going to internally spiral the elbows. Feel those elbow pits turning into the body. Starts to round the shoulders so they start to move forward. We're scooping as we exhale. See if you can feel that nice rounded upper back to rounded low back. Inhale, externally spiraling, pressing down into the floor as you feel the spine lift tall, open chest. Seeing how high can we get the top of the head to push to the ceiling. Exhale, spiraling the other way, drawing the navel in, scoop the tailbone, rounded shoulders. Want to see if we can feel a stretch between our shoulder blades, down into our low back, maybe a nice continuous stretch between the two. And then inhale as we externally spiral, grounding down through the palms, lifting the sternum tall. Can you feel that opening chest across the top of the chest? On our next exhale, as we inhale, getting tall, we're going to stay tall. And at this point, if you want, you can cross your legs. So I'm still grounded, externally spiraled, nice, tall, open chest. We're going to do some neck mobility. I want to keep actively pushing down into the hands to keep the shoulder blades downwardly pressed. If I soften off my hands, I'm more likely to shrug as we're doing our neck mobility, which is going to take away from what we're actually trying to get into in the neck. So I want to actively press down, spiraled out elbows, pack shoulders. And we're going to start by checking our blind spots. Nice slow exhale as we look over our right shoulder. Inhale as we come back to center. Nice slow exhale as we look over our left shoulder. And notice if the one side feels tighter and more restricted than the other. Now, when I'm turning, I want to try to turn from my chin and not from my forehead. I want to see how far can I get the tip of my chin to the edge or crest of my shoulder, or even a little bit behind the shoulder. And I want to do that on both sides. So I'm really moving the chin more than I'm moving my forehead or my eyes. I don't want my head to tilt where I'm leading with the top of my head. I want to keep that head nice and tall. I'm leading with the chin. And the more we lead with the chin, you should feel a little deeper mobility stretch into the lower cervical area. We'll come back to center. Now we're going to get into our light tilts and ear lift. So lightly tilting one ear towards the shoulder. This is not a heavy drop. I'm not trying to touch my shoulder with my ear. Just very lightly tilting, but then opposite side, I'm lifting that ear like I got a piece of string pulling my ear up, or like I'm trying to touch the ceiling. Now, as I'm lifting that ear, I'm actively pressing down through that same side shoulder a little bit to create traction. Inhale back to center, exhale to the other side. Light tilt and lift. Inhale as we're at center, exhale as you lift. This one's a real important one to notice the difference on the left side compared to right side. Is one side tighter and more restricted, especially down in this like triangle area of kind of the front lateral side of the neck. Tightness differences on one side to the other will have impacts on neck mobility as well as shoulder mobility and shoulder stability. This is generally a problem area for most people. So I definitely want to have a good level of assessment to how it feels on the left side compared to the right side. Good. Now we're going to do some shallow neck rolls and then we'll move away from the neck. Going to start with just light chin to chest. We're going to move the right ear to the right shoulder, then let our gaze come up to the ceiling, and then left ear to the left shoulder, chin back down to chest. And we're going to continue through those 4 points, slowly smoothing it out to more of a circular pattern, and then we can start to get deeper into that neck roll. Now, I want to go as deep in the neck roll as we can without pain and also without shrugging at the shoulder. So this is where we're actively pressing down, keeping those shoulders downwardly pressed. As you move through your neck, you might notice there's a spot that's a little sensitive and that shoulder wants to come up and protect you. If that's the case, lighten up your range of motion. I'm more interested in keeping that shoulder downwardly pressed and playing in the juicy nature of that mobility and not trying to force it. So I don't want to push it to where that shoulder has to come up to protect you. I want to stay a little soft with how far you're going into that range of motion. And then we're going to switch directions and start shallow again. So going back chin to chest, left ear to left shoulder, eyes up to the ceiling, right ear to the right shoulder, and chin back down to chest. And again, we'll start to slowly smooth those 4 points more into a circle. And an interesting thing on this movement is that you may feel more of a stretch moving in one direction than you did in the other direction. For me, my left side through all of this super tight compared to the right side coming out of this. I don't feel it over here. But when I was going in the other direction, I did not notice. I mean, the left side was a little tighter, but not nearly as tight as it is moving in this direction. So again, these are useful bits of information, like where is it tighter and why. If it's tighter in this area of the neck, it's probably going to be related to some shoulder stuff, as well as obviously neck stuff. It could be related to hip as well. All right. We're now going to shift into our quadruped position. So spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms, extending elbows fully. We're going to keep the toes untucked. Actually, no, I want to tuck them to start with. So tucking the toes. I want to get especially the big toe. I want to feel it tucked underneath as much as possible. We're going to get back into our crocodile breath on the inhale, exhale. Feel that navel drawing into spine. Inhale, filling up that abdominal wall like a balloon. On your next inhale, As you fill that wall up, on the exhale, we're going to let our hips start to sink back to the heels. And I want to feel that stretch into the big toe joint. Inhale, getting us back off, moving forward. Exhale, sinking into it. I want to feel that big toe softly stretch. I don't want to force it, but each one, I want to feel a little bit more weight of my hips resting into the ball and arch of the foot. Can I feel that area start to mobilize? How does it feel on the left big toe arch of the foot compared to the right big toe and arch of the foot? Does one side feel tighter, more restricted? I got a knee that is popping continuously here, right there. I also have a lot, that's my left knee, and I have a lot more tightness and tension in the left ball of my foot, which is probably related to what's going on at the knee. On the next one, as we exhale, getting into light tension, I don't want to get into heavy tension. We're going to do some slow windshield wipers, letting the heels roll out and then all the way back in like we're trying to touch them together. I want to make sure that this is not painful on that big toe joint. As we're going back and forth, you can slowly let the hips sink into it a little bit more as long as it is not painful. Then we're going to come back up to start, and we're going to untuck the toes so the ankles are nice and flat. We're going to do largely the same thing. Nice inhale forward, exhale, letting the hips sink back to the heels. We're seeing how close can we get the hips to the heels and then coming right back up. I want to make sure that this is not painful on the knees. As we're moving back and forth, are you able to get to the knees? If you are, then we can start to let the hands slide back. Can you sit all the way hips to heels? If there's tightness, tension, or pain in the knees, then I don't want to force that position. We're just moving into that direction as tight as you can. If you're able to get hips to heels, then we're going to be able to work into some pelvic tilt work here. But we're going to come out of that position and we're going to come into a tall kneel position first. And we're going to go ahead and tuck the toes again. So I want that big toe, the big toes kind of tucked underneath. And we're going to focus on pelvic tilt. So we're coming back into that crocodile breath, but on that inhale, we're going to let our pelvis tilt forward so that we get a big sway in the back. Belly's going to really open up out to the front. And then on the exhale, we're drawing that navel up and in as we scoop our tailbone forward. Again, trying to reach those fingers forward. Can you feel some stretch through the front of the hip? Inhale, going in the opposite direction. I want to make sure that we're not moving into pinch or pain in the low back. If you're able to get that scoop with a little bit of stretch, can you start to feel contraction in the glute? I want to feel maximum scoop, maximum contraction. Now, if you, at this point, we're going to start working to get back to our heels, getting into this back position. However, if the knees are sensitive and painful, then I want to avoid going all the way down. On our inhale, as our pelvis tilts forward and our tailbone reaches back, we're going to continue to reach, seeing how low can we comfortably go. If you're able to get to heels, great. At this point, exhale, scoop, and we're letting that scoop lift the hips back up. If you're not able to get all the way down, we can work in a shallower range that is not painful. So it's okay to get this little bit of a shallow range, not going all the way down to the heels. If you're able to get to the heels, inhale, tilt back. I'm continuing to reach back with that tailbone until I get to the bottom. Then I'm actively scooping, letting that scoop pull me back up. And we can do the same thing with the toes untucked. This is a different position without the toes tucked, so I want to go slow again into it. Inhale, pelvis tilts forward. Exhale, scoop. And as we start to inhale, tilt, we can start to reach back lightly. Again, if the knees are a little sensitive, keep it shallow. Get that scoop and allow the scoop to pull you back up. The knees are not painful, then we can start working closer and closer to the heels and get all the way back into that resting position and then actively scoop and let that scoop pull you back up. Again, this can be deep range or it can be shallow range. You're going to notice a good amount of stress through the quads into that anterior core. Again, we're working into kind of like quads, pelvic floor, anterior core, lower core. Good. And we'll come back down to the floor and we're going to get onto our back. So feet nice and flat to the floor. Nice inhale into that crocodile breath. Exhale, drawing navel down and into the spine. Inhale. I want to allow, we're getting more into pelvic tilt. So as we inhale, that belly is going to lift up to the ceiling. Pelvis is tilting forward so that we get this big sway in our back. You might be able to slide a hand underneath it. Exhale, navel, your belly button is like a thumb pressing your spine into the floor. As you scoop, inhale, belly lifts up nice and big. See how much range can you get from that pelvic tilt from this position. On our next inhale, as we exhale, we're going to scoop and we're going to let that tailbone pull our hips up, similar to what we did in the shin box to knees and what we just did in that tall kneel hip mobility work. So as we go from our inhale, belly off the floor, big sway in the back. Exhale, flattening out the spine to the floor with our belly button. From there, we're scooping the tailbone up and continuing to actively scoop until we get as high as we comfortably can. See if you can feel some stretch through the front of the thighs, contraction in the glutes. From there, inhale, pelvis, tailbone's going to tilt back down and reach to the floor. We're in that nice big sway back. Exhale, belly button to the floor as we scoop. Inhale, pelvis tilts towards the floor as it descends. So we should have more of an arch in the back as we're dropping. Exhale, spine flattens, scoops, and it's almost like you're trying to peel the tailbone off the floor and the spine off the floor. Again, it's the tailbone that is leading with the fingers trying to reach to the ceiling. Can you feel that maximum contraction in the glutes? Especially at the top. Inhale, bringing it back down. Exhale, navel pushes into the floor first. Flatten out the spine and then scoop and peel the tailbone up off the floor till you get to the top. On your next inhale, as you exhale and we get to that top position, we're going to stay at that top position. And we're now going to do our inhale and exhale from here. Inhale, allow the pelvis to tilt. Belly's going to lift up. We're going to get a little bit of a sway in the back. Exhale, drawing the navel up or navel in as we scoop. But we're trying to keep the hips at relatively at the same height. So inhale, tilts the pelvis, exhale, actively scoop. And with each exhale, see if you can actively scoop a little bit more so that you start to feel your glutes light up on fire. And we'll slowly bring the hips back down to the floor, let them rest. We're going to make our big C shapes out of our hands. Hands go below the ribs, above the hip bone in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall. Thumbs in the back, index fingers in the front. And we're coming back into our crocodile breath. Nice slow inhale. Feel that expansion of the abdominal wall pushing out into the thumbs, index fingers, and palms of the hand. Exhale, navel to spine. Allow the hands to clench down to create more resistance for that inhale phase. And with each inhale, see if you can expand that balloon a little bit bigger so that by the time you get to your 5th or even 10th breath, you're filling up that balloon to its maximum capacity. And with each exhale, try to get more and more full exhale out, as much of that breath out before you come into your next inhale. We can start to let the hands drop down to the side, palms facing up to the ceiling. Let the shoulders relax. Start to bring that breath up more into your chest, ribs, but kind of have that same idea of expansion in all directions. So it's not just moving up into the chest, but also out through the side of the ribs and into the upper back. And at this point, I want to imagine we're breathing into tension, whether that tension is in your neck and shoulders, in your chest and ribs or back, or down into the pelvic floor. Breathe into the tension, and on the exhale, allow the tension to just melt into the floor. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. Take your time getting up. Make sure you're not dizzy or lightheaded before you get into a sitting or a standing position.